allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of the
of
United
the United
States of
States of
America
America
and to the
and the
republic for
republic
which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation
one
under
nation,
God,
God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty
with
and
liberty and
justice for all.
justice for all.
Justice for all.
Okay. Lance, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've stopped streaming.
Nope. The stream is live on YouTube there.
Oh, okay.
This is just the Google Meet version. It's saying that Mr. Blasey would have to rejoin.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
just our backup stream. So I'll try it again. It's just so you can see it. There it goes.
That's right. Thank you, Lance.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Doug, we'll turn the meeting over to you.
Okay.
The stream is live on YouTube there. This is just
All right. Well, this meeting I'm going to do a little bit different this year than in past years. I'm not sure how much all of you have been made aware or have heard of the fiscal issues that the state and the federal government are having when it comes to education funding and some of the predictions for local tax collection rates for next budget year. So instead of going through revenue first, we're going to go through the expenditure pages. Just keep in mind that those expenditures that the administrators had earmarked for, we're going to have to look at making adjustments to that and possibly replacements of positions. So
we are prepared based on what comes out the next couple of weeks, making adjustments based on after what Doug says tonight, based on what is presented to us from the government and from the governor's budget and what we hear from the federal government. We have not gotten any numbers, but we will be prepared to make adjustments to this budget based on our expenses, which might be the supplies that were given to you. And we do have 3 positions that are open, and it might be hard choices that we have to make on whether we replace those positions or not because of very unusual circumstances that are presented to us and the lack of revenue that may not be coming to us that we are typically used to from the state and from the federal government. And I just want to let everyone know that this is not a position that we want to be in, but Mr. Lindner has my support and a decision that he and I will have to make and go through together once we know exactly what we are going to be faced with from this meeting forward. And I just wanted to help him along the way with this.
Yeah, just to give you a preview before I get into that revenue, what the state is projecting is that in property tax for our area, they believe we'll see a net 2.25% reduction. Earned income tax, 17.5% reduction. And I can already tell you for this year, I'm seeing $11,000 less per week in earned income, which will put us behind by almost $120,000 in just one form of tax in the current year. Real estate transfer tax, roughly 50%. Delinquent taxes, 35%. And interim tax, 50% reduction. So these are huge numbers that we're talking about, not small numbers where, well, if we just don't replace a copier. No, these are large 6-figure numbers that we'll have to deal with. we have a substantial fund balance, and it's good that we do. We've already looked to program our building expenses through refinancing of bond debt, which I think we were ahead of the curve on. So, we don't have to worry about that. This is Fund 10. This is our operating fund, not our building fund. Um, so um, I just wanted to preface that. Um, in the discussion with some of the other business managers, there are districts that are looking at um, seven-figure reductions in taxes. One district even this year. Um, so I mean, it's significant. And, this is the whole part of the third and the whole fourth quarter that this is affecting. This is something bigger than when we had the recession in 2008. If you remember, we had the fracking industry up here, so we saw an increase in collection and an increase in earned income tax. This is something completely different. This is a wholesale reduction in tax and collection across the board. Along with that, the House in the PA House and Senate have both sponsored bills through committees that would extend the discount period, that would eliminate the delinquent period, that would prohibit any type of raise in tax at all. So when you have the inability to collect because of lack of revenue, and at the same time, the State House and Senate telling you we're going to take those instruments from you as well. I'm not sure how they think some districts will remain liquid through the summer. You extend the tax period 60 days. That's what schools are starting to use those funds in July when they start collecting on real estate tax, because you generally don't get the state subsidy payments until August and September. So you need to work through a couple months on what you have in your checkbook before they start sending you any money. So I don't see us in that position. We went through this a number of years ago where we didn't receive state subsidy until March. But at that point, we were still able to collect completely on our other sources of income, our EIT, our real estate, our transfer tax, um, our interim tax, tax in lieu. So we were able to do all of that before. So um, I don't think any of us in our lifetimes has experienced something that will affect as drastically state and local government as this current COVID event. Um, so, so what I'm going to do is, all of you should have a hard copy, and those who weren't at the meeting when I handed them out on March 31st, I emailed. So I believe most everyone should have a hard copy. So when we go through, not much has changed on that, because like I said, by this time, in a normal year, we would be receiving contracts for services, even within the IU. We're just in the review phase. Generally, we know how much we're going to spend by this time. No one's in their offices. So I don't even know what fuel costs are going to be next year. And usually that's nailed down by this time. So most of our contracts are up in the air. So those costs aren't there. And as well as state agencies for a lot of our state subsidies, for our JARS, for our special ed, our regular ed, our driver, vocational subsidies, all of that. Everything has been delayed. So I'll start. Let's see. Let's start on page 8.
Doug, can I interrupt for one moment? Everything has been delayed except for the due date of when our budget is due. So nothing has been given to us as far as figures, as far as anything from the governor's office, from the federal government, and from this, but no relief has been given to any school districts on due dates. So the May due date is still there, and the June due date on when all budgets are due is still there on the books. We have not received any notification on an extension of when school budgets are due. And that is the reason why we're moving forward on this. And that is the reason why we have to give you the figures that we're giving you as we are.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of these changes I just found out about yesterday, so they won't be included. So what I'm going to do is just show you the areas that we can consider where we can take cuts from, so that we can tally those between Patty and I, and the administrators come up with a plan to remove those. So, our revenue obviously doesn't have to match those cuts then. Um, I guess when I was briefly again, when we talk about subsidy, now, of course, you've heard that the feds may offer money to the states for education. What the state is, what they're telegraphing is there might be a reduction um, in the subsidy that they were going to offer next year. So it's not a decrease in an increase, it's an actual decrease. And then what isn't matched from this year would be the federal government money. You know what I mean? So it would be level funded, but then that puts us in a situation like education was in just 10 years ago, when you have a reduction in federal funds, then you go back to what the state funded, and then it takes years to get back to the highest level of state funding again. So it won't be an additional money from the feds. It will be money that will essentially keep us even funded. So it will actually be a reduction in state funding. So anyway, so we'll start there with page 8. And again, this is the regular elementary program. K through 3, the multi-grade are like your phys ed and your art and music, and the 4 through 6. The combination of those numbers for teachers and instructional aides is essentially their salaries. And then below that to 200s are their benefits. And then professional services, which are services that are educational services. And then we start to get into things like the other services, the postage, tuition, travel. Tuition there is what you see. That's your cyber tuition. And then we can start to see where we would be pulling money for savings would be in the 600s. Since we participate in the state bid consortium for general supply, that has already gone in. However, the other supplies that we look to purchase, as well as textbooks and technology. So that area, like if you look at 618, 648, 640, and under 600 supplies, new equipment, technology, replace equipment, those are all areas where we can look to reduce costs. So in these building budgets, primarily what you're looking at is salary and benefits with a little bit of variable expense in the supplies that we purchase. So hopefully, given a year, we can get the economy back on track, whereas, we're being funded again. And we wouldn't be catching up. If we didn't spend for something this year, we would just be skipping this year. And next year would be year 1. So like if we said, well, we were going to purchase textbooks this year, but we'll wait till next year. We're not purchasing 2 sets next year. it would be just one set that year. It's as if this year didn't exist as a budget function for those purchases. We would just skip a year of purchasing and then move on when the budget starts to pick up again. So that's the idea. The next page, page 9, is your general secondary instruction: math, science, English, social studies, other instructional, your phys ed, your art, music. And again, the majority of the expenses and salary and benefits. Tuition again is...
Excuse me, Doug.
Yes. Yes, Nolan.
Yeah, I was gonna, that tuition on both page 8 and 9.
Mhm.
Yeah, that tuition on both page 8 and 9.
Yes.
You said is cyber teaching, or I guess
Yeah.
I'm a little confused if that's
that's
our teachers when they have to do cyber teaching, correct?
No, that's the budgeted expense for the cyber students, cyber school students that we currently are paying for.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, in the 560, the tuition. Yeah. Are you looking at the 240 tuition?
Well, no, I was looking at the 240.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Or is it the same?
But yeah, the 240 tuition is the benefit based on
the 240 tuition is where I was looking on.
Yeah, that's budgeted for our teachers to take classes. That's covered in the contract.
The 560 is the one that's for cyber school.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Yep.
Big chunk of change.
So when you look at this, the insurance is the actual insurance. So you have the salary.
Okay, I thought you mentioned something when you said that on page 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 240 to it. Yeah, that's what. Okay, the 240 tuition I thought you said was cyber school, but that's the 560.
Yes. Yep.
And the 250 is their tuition for continued education.
Yeah. And the tuition is based on the number of teachers in that category and a figure that represents the portion of classes that both Ed and Mary provide me kind of an estimate of the teachers saying if they're staying the next year, how many classes they think they're going to take. And we have to budget some money in there because that's part of a negotiated contract item. So that's what goes in that column. And then again, like the other pages, the supplies that we would be talking about would be your 618, 648, 640, and then supplies, new equipment, technology equipment, and a replacement of equipment. So you can see in some of those categories, there's significant amounts budgeted there. So that's where we'll start looking for savings within the budget. Okay, page 10 is special ed. And these are all the current assignments. Now, I guess I should say, if you want to, where I take the number for those salaries are in the appendix. So it'd be Appendix 1, professional. That's where all their salaries are programmed, where they are as of this date by credit that they'll have earned by the start of next year. So those salary figures are then programmed into each one of these budget pages. in the area that they're assigned. So in that Appendix 1, you'll see what everyone's projected salary is there for next year. And if they have any extra days, like you have supplemental contracts for guidance and librarian, tech ed. So that's where those numbers come from, if you're wondering. So, and then their assignments here are, in their teaching category. And then whatever insurance they've selected. So, I mean, what's disappointing in all of this, we were really laying out to have a decent year, all things considered. If the world had stayed healthy, we can take some solace in, if we make some changes here, we'll still be in relatively good condition. I'm fearful of some urban districts who can't make it through the summer without injections of cash from the state. So
Doug,
this is,
I assume that delaying things like purchasing new books for social studies or whatever department is scheduled for it should make enough cuts that we can scrape through.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I always take a conservative approach when it comes to revenues, but even last year we didn't collect as much in earned income as I thought we could have. But so since I use a 3-year rolling average, that actually reduced what I expected in our current year. So, some of these trends are hard to predict. Yeah, we have enough in fund balance for a couple of years. What we need to make up for is hundreds of thousands of dollars, always at the end of the year. If 2 years ago, last year, we used some fund balance, but I said we were going to. The year prior to that, we were within $1,800 of what we collected, we spent, which is pretty close,
Yes.
So we're always right about there. So we're either a little bit above or a little bit below. So when you talk about our spread, it's in the hundreds of thousands. I couldn't imagine a district our size trying to plug $1 million hole. That.
Typically, we advertise for the new teaching positions in May. We're probably going to hold off on those positions until we have a little bit
Yeah.
more of an idea of what's happening.
Yeah.
We have a couple secretarial position that we will move forward on, but
Well, we almost have to fill, like Mary McClintock's
Correct.
office secretary. I mean, that
Correct.
goes without saying.
correct.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Correct.
always much better to you don't want to have to think of furlough or cutting programs or positions. It's much better to take it through attrition, and then if you need that position in a following year,
Right.
that's something that you're not eliminating a position, you're just not filling it. There's a difference there.
Oh.
Like before you and I were here when we eliminated a Spanish position. That was the elimination of a position, not an individual. And then the individual was furloughed. Instead of someone retiring or resigning and just not replacing, you didn't eliminate the position. So,
Yeah, to hire someone and have them move here and go through all of that
yeah.
and then to lay them off the next year is just awful.
Yes. And we have so many with different certifications that we consciously did that when we
Hmm.
were hiring so that we had the flexibility to move people if we
Oh,
needed
sure.
to. So there's 3 that are retiring and
Well,
1 we have to retire.
before your time, we had Mildred Frazier, who had taught history for probably 30 years and then came back to home ec because she had it as a certification.
Right,
So then she was split between the two. So,
right.
Yeah, so the 1300s are your consumer education, your tech ed, business ed, VOTech, driver ed. Um, there's not a whole lot when it comes to supplies. You know, we might be asking the tech ed to sacrifice a little bit there. Um, you know, but like I said, these numbers, if you see down beside the highlighted column uh, where it says 2021, you'll see like what the increase was. These are pretty modest increases for next year, and it was essentially just inflation. Um, you know, we didn't have big turnovers of staff, big increases in the step schedule or anything. It was primarily just the cost of doing business. All right. Where am I was looking at the wrong machine. Okay, summer school, page 12. Summer school, homebound instruction, alternative ed. Now, some of this, um, like the alternative ed, that isn't necessarily special education. You know, that would be programs that Mary and Ed also send students to, but sometimes Randy's involved with those special placements. And the extended school year is Randy's. That's when we provide instruction that continues throughout the summer for some of our special needs students. Um, the other summer school you'll see there, that is an expense that we probably won't have. Um, and we we spend out of our general fund as well as our Title II fund. Our Title II fund, it's a federal fund for professional development, but you're able to use what they call a REAP flex. We flex some of those funds over to Title I to provide for summer school for Title I eligible and some non-Title I eligible students that Mary has in the elementary. And we pay for that. Title I students are paid out of Title I funds. Title II students are paid for out of local funds, as well as some Title I that's earmarked as, well, that came from Title II. So, you know, you can flex those funds around. Um, so the expense for this expense here will probably be eliminated, as well as those other federal expenses for summer school, because you know, this usually starts right after the 4th and runs for 4 weeks through July. So we don't even know if we'll have access to our facilities, and certainly we won't be able to transport the students. So this is something that we're going to have to think of a different way to provide. So, okay. 2100s are your guidance offices, as well as some of Randy's services when it comes to professional services. You'll see that 72. Um, Randy's services, like Lance's, are kind of attributed all throughout the budget, just depending on her areas or where in her areas it's spent. For psychological services, you know, we have someone from IU 17 coming here to provide those. It's primarily for IEP services, evaluations. Um, and so for the guidance, that's salary and benefits for the guidance secretarial and for uh, the guidance uh, the guidance person themselves. Not too much in there except for some of their testing materials and some of their support materials. So you'll see there's subscriptions to some online catalogs of college information. There's some online databases for that, as well as some software that they use to assist in those searches, and then some of their testing, like their ACT testing, SAT, SAT prep, that sort of thing. Next page is 15, the 2200s. And this is where you see Anthony, like in that chart of accounts I gave you, where it's all how it's broken out. Our tech services, this is some of Lance's. The 2240s are district-wide expenses for certain expenditures. So you see that there. There's also expenditures, district-wide expenditures for things like copiers. So you see some of that expense in there. Library services, there you have your libraries, your librarian salaries, the special ed director's salary. And then as you work your way over to the 2270 is professional development for both elementary and secondary. And some of that is funded by your Title II program. The money comes in, it's placed in 2270.
What is the big difference between the elementary and the secondary for the staff development?
In the elementary, there's also some money from the Title I that goes for staff development. And that's just,
it had to be.
Yeah, and we can always, between those two and the 2270s, we can always flex that around, if we need to, just depending on who's active there.
Well,
See, there's no secondary teacher that can use Title I funds for professional development, but elementary can use Title II. But then an elementary can use Title I and Title II.
Well, I know a lot of the staff development programs have combined both the elementary and the secondary staff. So
yeah,
I figure it all comes out in the wash.
So not a whole lot of expense here. I mean, the library, of course, you have book expense. All those expenses will have to be evaluated. Some of Lance's there you'll see down here for replace equipment. He's going to have to determine what he can live with next year, ensuring that our infrastructure is maintained. The next page, 16, board treasurer services, board services and treasurer services. These are services, all the subscription services for the school board, the bonds that are required on our, the insured bonds that we have on some of our members, advertising, travel, supplies. Treasurer services, those are things specific to the treasurer. They want that separated out, just like some of our accounting services when I get to the 2500s. So the treasurer themselves, like Gabe's bond, it comes out separate from the rest of the board services. That's just the way they want that placed. Tax collection, that's our payment for taxes collected. We pay per percentage and by parcel. So that's what that is. And then we pay Social Security and Medicare on that. And then you'll see the postage, the bonds, we're bonded. The printing and binding, that's the general services for our duplicate books.
The
Any
advertising,
supplies? Yeah.
the advertising would be for Any advertising for the district for positions available?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all throughout the year. It's when we have to do our posting for our meetings in December.
Right.
It's when anytime we go out to bid with anything and we have to post that, any advertisements for open positions, um, you know,
Request
anything
for
from,
bids, etc. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. The next page, the 2360. 2300s are primarily your administrators, the superintendent, elementary, high school principal, and the reading supervisor. Now, if you look at Appendix 1, we have Megan Behensky. Her salary is divided among, I believe, 4 different funding categories. She's the federal and state liaison for title. She's the reading supervisor. She's paid as a teacher, and I forget what her other one is. So, they're all divided up. We do that with the gifted as well, percentage of the day. Like Katie Ellis, who's a librarian, portion of her pay is gifted. We'd do that not this year, but in past years when we had Becky Aldinger in between special ed and emotional support, it was a percentage of the day, and now she's just all emotional support, so that we're accurately reflecting the function of the position and not the individual within the budget. So you can see those costs there. All right, the next page, the 2425. This is, that's page 18. Health services is 2,400. Business office is 2,500. I'm not sure that I think I put like 25-00. They really have some of these expenses. In order to get a federal indirect cost rate, and what an indirect cost is essentially an administrative charge to any program. When we fill out grants in this district, we never attach how much the electricity and the rent of the room and how much it costs to maintain the room. We never put those indirect costs as part of, like, if we have a reading grant, it all goes to the classroom. We don't try to break that out. But a couple of years ago, the state required that we have an indirect cost rate. So some of these accounts I have to break out, like with business office. Amy and I are 2,511, and that 11 means that we're the primary component, which means we're kind of the number one, the number one individuals to work in that office. And then you'd have other people that would be like a line item 20, which you wouldn't use ours because we're the head of component, but you could use the 20s as part of your indirect cost rate. So I've had to break them out, but I've never had to use the indirect cost rate. So I'm not sure why I'm explaining all this. Maybe Anthony will find it interesting, but so when you look through the chart of accounts and you see some of those broken out even further, it's because of the federal requirement for indirect cost rate, even though we never fill that out. Usually in your grants, it'll say how much of this grant, what percentage of this grant is used as part of your indirect cost rate. We always say 0. The money comes in. The district pays the full local costs of my position, and I don't farm out a portion of that when I write a grant. Now, maybe a lot of grant writers are paid that way. If they have 5 big grants and they say 20% for each grant or something, and then that pays for the position. But 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. So as you're going down through there, You'll see the health services under professional services. We do have some professional services for health services, maintenance of equipment. You have audiology equipment and optical equipment. There's some other maintenance services, disposal of hazardous waste. Some of those additional services. And for business office, that's our auditor service. We pay for an audit for both real estate tax collection and our general fund each year. Property services for the district, that would be some insurance costs. Uh, and again, even my expenses here, we're going to have to look at all those and excise out what we don't need. All right. 2,600. Custodial maintenance. This is another one where you have the head of component and your other salaries. So Chris is actually handled separately in his salary, and then everyone else. If you look at our chart of accounts, that's why I put that 00 up there at the top. They're combined for the purpose of this page, but accounting wise, they're separate. Pretty much for the salary, I mean, that's just where everyone is. That's Appendix 2 for your support staff. You can look and see what all the maintenance and custodial personnel salary and benefits looks like for next year. And then all these other numbers below are reflected to the right. There's certain things that we have to maintain. Asbestos surveillance, since 1989, when that, I forget what that act is called. But it was 1989 where every public building had to have remediation and essentially baseline numbers created for an asbestos surveillance program. There was a lot of abatement done in the school then, a little bit over the years, and then after the fire, pretty much there's nothing left in the elementary school, and if there's very little, if any, left in the high school. Might be in the walls somewhere, but wherever they tested, it's undetectable in the hallways. When they did that, engineers came for the fire in the auditorium. There was some paint on the firewall to the front that they'll have to take off. Some small areas like that, but any of those issues that have been with asbestos in the past, that's gone. The right to know the air quality, that's some more air testing. The sewage plant operation, we currently use HDC, to maintain our testing and maintenance of our sewer plant. That's something that I report every month to DEP. They provide me the lab certifications, and that's just something we have to maintain our certification. The other property services are pretty much what they're costing this year. Some areas we might look at, Chris and I, would be like the parking lot road repair. Make sure that we're taking care of our heating plant, because what we don't want is burst pipes or cold sections of the building. We want to make sure if we're making any cuts that we're just not deferring our maintenance, but we're actually planning maintenance through the period, so we're not just putting a Band-Aid on something when it really needs to be fixed. That's one of the worst things we can do. A leak in a roof will really cause an issue, or a leak in your heat plant is really going to cause an expensive issue. So it's something we wouldn't defer. We would try to take care of that, but there are other areas there where we could probably cut back.
Tremco is the roof, correct?
Yes. Yep. That's our contract with them. They come through, I believe it's quarterly, if not just 3 times a year. They survey the whole roof. They take pictures. They actually have they have a piece of equipment that what do I want to say, infrared scope, where they look to see if they have hot spots on the roof. Essentially a change in density, I guess, so they can see if it's leaked down into the roofing material. So, and then they've been able to provide us with a list of repairs that they can take care of, or we can take care of on our own. That's a good thing to have somebody else's eyes, that they're roofing people. So it's somebody else's
Professionals know
eyes
what
on
they
the
do.
roof, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can look down through there. Electricity is pretty much what that is. I mean, we're going to see a decrease in usage here the last quarter of this year, obviously, but it won't be that substantial.
So Doug,
Um,
what took place from budget 1819 on 300 from 17.5 to 62.5? Was that fire related, or what was that? There was quite the jump between now and 2018, 2019 on 2600, 300.
where are you looking at the?
Professional services under 2600, line item 300. I mean, we're 65,000, 62,500, but 2 years ago we were 17,500.
It could have just been the way that accounting wise they were attributed, like the 300s, all of those.
Just what pennies, what pot was coming out of
Yeah.
reallocated. Okay.
Yeah, because you know um, they changed a lot. It used to be 648 was software and 758 was hardware, say, and now anything 758 is software. Um, a lot of your services, your 300s changed from 400 and 500s to 300s. Um, and sometimes you sit and you guess, is it a 300 service, 400 service, or 500 service? It all depends on who you get it from. If it's a private person, if it's a public entity, or if it's service you do yourself, and then it's kind of a toss up. So, um, yeah, if I look at the combined totals, they're roughly the same. I think there was a time where Amy and I just went through and tried to make everything as correct as we could at that point. Um, when when you find out if you're attributing the correct place is when you try to do your annual financial report. And then they'll say these codes have been changed to these codes, and then we'll have to do all these transitions. We'll go in and recode. That's why, like over the summer, you'll see like there's a motion to allow the business manager to make account code changes as required to complete the annual financial report. That's what that's about. Lots of times there's just nuanced changes within there.
Okay. So we didn't actually, I mean, it's just how they did the numbers versus we
Yeah.
didn't hire 40 some $1,000s of professional services. It's just we reallocated funds that we spent from somewhere else
Yeah.
for
And
coding.
we tried to really delineate where they were going there. We had less listed before.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also within the 2600s, the insurance, you see that big number, that's just where the building, your general liability insurance comes out, is in the 2600s. 2660s is also where they put the new safety and security money. So that's where you have your school police officer.
Question, sir.
Yes.
Under the property services, water, is the district metered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've always been metered up
I
here.
thought so, but
Yeah.
I know they're putting meters around now, so
Yeah, I kind of hedged my guess there about what our water usage would be, because it'll probably go up somewhat, but I- I'm still not sure of what ratio they're going to use, because your metered customers, I believe the Highlands and the courthouse, us, we've always had a meter that we've given, one of our maintenance guys would go down, run the meter, and then, call Jeff Schultz up and let him know what it was. So we've been metered, but if they're going to adjust everyone else's water, that will probably change ours a little bit, but probably not too much. All right, and the second part there, these are supplies. This is all stuff that, see, when the property services are taken out over here in the 300s, and then the supplies would be things that we would do ourselves. So, we'll go through this too, just to make sure that we're not, that we can't save some money in here as well as the miscellaneous replacement of equipment down here, the 700. The dues and fees in the 2600s, primarily that's your DEP fees, your sewer permit fees, your boiler vessel inspection, placards that you get each year.
Do we have to pay for emissions testings on the biofeed or the bio system? Do we do emissions testings on that for the state?
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's part of our combined application. When we added that biomass plant, our application now has our total emissions in aggregate altogether. If you didn't have that wood burning plant, they wouldn't really care if your oil boiler, it looked like it was a cold start on a tractor. You know what I mean? But once we had that down there, they checked paint hoods, our kitchen vents, I mean, everything all together, what our total emissions were. So, we keep a log that we have to report for that. And it is part of our combined application. We do stack testing. So every so many years they come, and it's usually towards the end of the season. You try to get them in April while it's still operating, efficiently.
I remember.
By temperature, and then they do a metered reading on that just to try to determine efficiency.
I remember, though, that the biomass plant, the emissions were lower than with heating with oil.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. When that's going, it has to be a very dry day, it has to be a humid day even to see condensation from that plant. Sometimes that can be running, and if it's a cold day, you can still have snow on the cap on the outside of that melts down into the where it exhausts. I mean, because that much temperature is retained within the system. It's that efficient. So yeah. All right, 2700s. This is transportation. And what we do now, if you remember our transportation budget or contracts, is that we pay the state value of the route. So each year in the spring, we put together what we believe the route will look like for the following year, the number of students, the miles, age of the bus. You put that all in, and then there's this calculation that tells you what that route is worth, and then we pay the state route plus a stipend. We pay an additional amount if they have cameras in their bus. Now this is where the state likes you to keep your buses under 15 years of age. If you have a bus that's over 15, they don't qualify for subsidy. So, we like to be paid, at least reimbursed a portion for the routes when they're run. So that's one of the reasons we like to have newer equipment. Plus, in our routes up here, it's not like driving around Loyal Sock. Once you have a bus that's been on the road up here for 15 years, it's pretty dogged out. So, so that's how these rates are established, essentially what the state says they're worth. And that's what the contractors have agreed to. You'll see right to the right of that, there's some initials. We have some parents in this county that live so remotely that we can't get to them, and they actually transport to a bus stop where we pick them up. And so that's some of the IRS rate reimbursement that we have for those parents. Below that, you'll see some of the feeder routes that we have for some of our special programs like SERVE, our activity. So in the excess fuel estimate, I've really reduced that. I might eliminate that altogether. If some of you remember, if the cost of fuel goes beyond a certain amount, both gasoline usage and diesel, that we would pay them the difference between what we can get it for and what they're buying on the open market. We've taken care of that with the diesel because we provide diesel. So primarily now it was just gasoline, and that's if it's over $3.25 a gallon. I don't see that happening this year. So that's probably something I'm just going to excise out of this budget. The way fuel oil looks right now, generally at this time, we would have a solid bid for what diesel would be for next year. The market is in such turmoil that they've pushed that back now. I responded to an email today from the CSIU, who does the Keystone Purchasing Network, the general, or they do the art, the general, and the paper, the copy paper bid for the year, but they also do fuel oil, gasoline, diesel for statewide. PennDOT actually participates with that. But the bids have been so erratic that they've pushed it off to June. And the other thing I have to deal with is I have to purchase a certain amount in the contract year. I've stated that I needed 45,000 gallons, which is 6 fill-ups. In the current year, I've only had 4. So I'm actually on the hook for 2. So I've negotiated that from the 217 that it is down to $1.54. So I can unload 2 more tanks at $1.54, and then I would go with whatever they bid in June. So I mean, this year is just difficult. I don't know how else to describe it.
I don't know how you keep it all straight. I really don't.
Well, I know with that, some of those petroleum, they'll end up going out of business, because they've purchased fuel at a certain rate, and if the people who have contracted for that at least don't cover their cost, which is what that was, they were knocking 60 cents off. They're stuck with it, and then it costs them just to keep it in the terminal. So yeah, so I don't know what the fuel bid will be for next year. And now I can't imagine it's going to be much less than $1.50. That's transport cost, So, but we don't have to worry about that I guess where I'm going is we don't need to worry about that for excess fuel costs because it's not going to go above $2.75 next week. I remember taking this over a decade ago and Paul Schaefer saying, we'll never see diesel below $4 a gallon. So that's how much we've changed. So that's transportation. You can see there's not too much of a change. Most of what you see there is just the rate of increase in the state subsidized routes. All right, the next page is 21. This is system-wide technology. This is essentially Lance and any connections we have with the district. So you'll see his salary and benefits, and then where it says communication, primarily that's like telephone lines and fiber optic connections, that sort of thing. Most of his expenses that we can look at would come in the hardware side and the general expense funds. Your your elementary and secondary education technology support. This would primarily be things that we wouldn't be able to take from the support of the network. The next page, page 23, are your student activities and student athletics. Now, I want to call your attention to Appendix 3 and Appendix 4. That's where the Appendix 3 and Appendix 4 are all the expenses that are then plugged into that 2800 page,
Okay, what's the page number you're
or
looking at, sir?
3200. Page 23,
Okay.
that page 23 where you see the expenses, they are placed there from what is on Appendix 3 and Appendix 4.
Oh, okay.
So these are all the uh, coaching salaries as we have them, plus the experience, the associated benefits that are with those coaching, and where Josh and Ed have placed the expenses for athletics in that year. So like the equipment, supplies, uniforms, that sort of thing, they're kind of rotated each year. They're just a little bit different because they're rotated between teams who gets the new equipment, or, you know, I'm sure bats and helmets change every year, but uniforms, that's where you'll see the change in expense for uniforms. The increase in the past, there was a big increase from, if you remember, 1819 to 1920. That was when we had increase in athletic contract. We went up to $2.36 per mile. But when other business managers or other districts are actually paying significantly more than that. So I was irritated when we first got those bids, but after looking at other districts, what they were paying for transportation, we had a bargain for years. So those are actually quite reasonable. But that was the big increase that we saw transportation over those years. Primarily, we've had salaries for our positions. Some have been around for a long time, like Mr. Koshak's been a coach forever. Glenn Vaughn's been a coach forever. But some of those other coaching positions, like your wrestling, your soccer, cheerleading, your basketball, like especially junior high, they seem to come and go. So those are up and down. They're not always up every year, just depending on who we have filling the positions. So, and then if you go to Appendix 4, that's the activities. These are all the assigned activities for the district, the benefits, and the costs as established by the principal for those activities, like the FBLA. Primarily, that's transportation, because we always seem to have good teams, both going to state and national, almost every year, it seems. So we have to have a good portion of that there. The Envirothon, their participation in a lot of events. Some smaller fees, your band, your chorus, we have regional events, county events, we have to budget for that. So that's what's reflected on that page 23. All right, the final budget page is the debt service page, the 5100s, 5200s, and 5900s. That's on page 24. This is where interest and principal payments are broken out, as well as fund transfers. What I did want to point out is I did, generally we we move our plan con money from the general fund into the building fund. And last year we had $100,000 transferred as part of the budget into the building fund. We have $104,000 in the fund reserve of the building fund right now. And then, of course, we'll have the additional money from the refinancing that will be going into the capital project fund for building expenses. So for next year, I had really, before a lot of these other bad numbers came down, said next year, actually, I went back later and I thought, man, I wish I still had something programmed in there that I could automatically have a savings. I think that we'll have uh, enough money put aside for building expenses, maintenance expenses, that I eliminated everything from the transfers there. So what you're looking at is, in the reduction there, is no $100,000 transfer from the general fund to the building fund, and the plan con fund I'll just use as cash within the general fund. So what you see there, that food service expense, is the local district contribution to the food service fund, or the proprietary account. The food service account is to be financed by itself. It's held outside the general fund accounts. So at the end of the year, the revenue that's taken in that proprietary food service account reimburses up to a certain percentage of salary and benefits and the operation of that, plus all the other expenses for the purchase of commodities and supplies and everything. And we always have a deficit in that account because you have to keep a certain amount in there to start the following year, which is around $20,000. So at the end of this year, when all the activity is taken out, I have around $20,000 that I keep in there, but then I reimburse the general fund for those expenses that the general fund paid for throughout the year. So I write a check from the food service account to the general fund, keeping that $20,000 in the food service account. So in looking at our contract, which was, if you remember, rebid with the nutrition group, we'll have a transfer of 56, which is pretty much what's been in line for the last 7 years that we've been operating, that I've kept track of that.
Question, sir.
Mhm.
The breakfasts and lunches that have been distributed
Yeah.
since the shutdown, are those among the reimbursable expenses?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to be, according to that Act 13, we would be paying our employees anyway. The fact that we're supplying meals, which is a tremendous benefit for our county residents,
For our district, yes.
we're actually, and having that waiver where we can supply a meal to any 18 and under, whether they go to this district or not, is allowing us to apply for a subsidy for every one of those meals. So we're
Good.
being subsidized, both federal and state subsidy for all those meals. So at least I'm able to carry expenses in the food service. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that the amount that won't be able to be reimbursed from this year will be much significantly less than if we wouldn't have attempted to operate, which that's not the primary consideration. The primary consideration is to
Just feeding the
provide
kids,
meals,
yeah.
but it also had a positive effect of the district. You know, of course, we still had the expense of the commodity, the actual food itself, but we're covering our labor costs by continuing our operation.
Good.
The unfortunate is that will end when the school calendar ends, which will be June 5th. Something, yes,
That's not good.
no.
Yeah.
The food pantry, not the food pantry, the food bank boxes will continue. However, the grab and go meals
Yeah.
will stop when our calendar stops, which is June 5th.
Yeah, see, our
Yes.
waiver was to provide through the COVID-19 waiver, USDA waiver, was to allow sites to operate as if it were summertime. And then essentially, with a wink and a nod, they allowed us to operate even though we didn't qualify because you're supposed to have 50%. We only have 40%. So essentially, we were given two waivers. A waiver to function even though we were at 40%, not 50%, and that we could use this summertime program that other districts use to feed in the summer for the grab and go. So when our calendar ends, that ends that program. So we
Right.
don't actually have the other waiver. You know what I mean? It's so
Right.
it's like they're allowing us to function is that.
Well,
So-
if we're working under a summertime waiver now,
But COVID-19, they're
Yeah,
they're using the
it's-
framework of the
Okay,
seamless summer
gotcha.
option,
Gotcha.
and they're
Right.
calling it COVID-19.
Okay.
So
tried that too,
we're
but-
operating under we're operating under that framework per claim, because there's a computer program that you put all these claim numbers in. The way they count the meals, the way you can package and deliver the meals, your offsite waivers, all of that. They're just use that because then right away they could start functioning. But what we don't have is we don't qualify to run a summer program.
Because we only have
So they would move from
40%.
COVID to SS to the seamless summer option, to which we don't qualify for.
So we have everything but the food.
So is there a possibility of getting a waiver to offer a summertime program?
Yeah,
We're gonna
nothing has been.
nothing from there, but I'm trying.
Please check it out.
Yes, I'm trying. We've got the volunteers. Like I said, we have everything but the food ready to go. We've been looking.
Because with the number of people who are out of work,
Oh,
you know,
I know.
putting food on the table is tough.
I know. We see that by the numbers that show up and
I'm
that are
sure.
so grateful and that are so kind and yes. And like I said, so grateful when they do show up. So we know, we understand. We're looking.
Well, I'm looking at, budget for next year, but I'm thinking there had to have been some savings because of the spring sports not going ahead. So there are places that we could transfer money to food costs.
But here's the problem. When you have a budget, you also expect revenues. I'm right now down $151,645 over a 3-year rolling average for the last 5 weeks. So I mean, it's having an effect now. And like the State House, they were saying, well, the district should have they're not functioning, so they should have a good cushion at the end of the year. Well, that's all well and good, but like it was a couple weeks of delinquent, but we received at least that quarter. Transfers, interims, earned income tax. I've only received
all the revenue is down as well as all the expenses.
Like I said, I'm down so far in earned income tax on a 3-year average from March and April, 26,000 and 39,000, almost 11,000 a week. That's not coming in on earned income tax. So, you can say, well, yeah, that money was budgeted, but you need to have the revenue to support that. So
I understand that. Really, I do. It's just that, if there's any way we can come up with it.
So Anthony, I found your 45,000, the jump. Sorry. It's the school police officer.
Oh, is it?
So he was only in for 1 year. Back on page 19. So we do the changing of the things, but it was it was an even amount of 45,000. So it was the school police officer and it was his first year. So it was that simple amount. Professional services, because we contract him, even though he's ours, we contract the school police officer. So it's the even from 17.5 to 62.5.
Yeah, so if we go back to essentially what's the first page in this whole thing, or the third page after the title page, the revenue summary. This is what it would have looked like. And like I said, use of fund balance. You also have contingencies built in there. Generally, we don't expend all of our budget. So it was laying out to be a decent budget. But then, like I said, I've got some numbers here. Like in the real estate, in the worst case scenario that the state is forecasting, that 8,440,000, they're saying it could see a reduction of 189,000. The earned income could see a reduction of 80,937. Realty transfer 57,000. Delinquent real estate 116,000. I mean, you add all that up, that's a reduction in potential reduction of $445,000 for next year in revenue. So that's expenses that can't be met by revenue. So that's what I'm looking at there. But this also considered that we were raising taxes. So if the state says we can't raise taxes, that's another 200,000 we have to look at. So you can see there's a considerable amount that we need to extract from this budget. Now, I'm not thinking we'll experience all of those. Like our collection in real estate, the majority of our collection, we have a very good collection rate. We're the 7th lowest taxing in the state. So although no one likes to pay taxes, they're not onerous in this district. Earned income will probably pick up. The thing with your real estate tax, if it's assessed, either you get it in delinquent or you get it in regular collection, but you usually end up getting it. I mean, it's just our collection rate up here is more than 97%. And if you consider delinquent, it's 101%. The 1% is your penalty. So the taxes you don't get back is if you don't have a lot of transfer of sales or you don't have people working on their property. Your interim taxes is where you have someone file a permit for a renovation or an addition. And then at the end of the year, it's a different value than what the property started out at the beginning of the year. So the homeowner pays a prorated portion of the increase in value of that property for that year. So you might get another $900 or something throughout the year, and those add up. So the interim people won't be doing work because no one's been able to do work. The transfer people haven't sold homes because they can't sell homes. And the earned income can never come back. Once that's lost, it's just lost. If someone didn't work for 3 months, they don't get to work an additional 3 months next year. They can't work 15 months next year to make up for the fact. So those are taxes that just aren't recoupable. If that's a word, Becca. Can't be recouped. So
I knew what you meant.
Yep. So for the basic subsidy, the special ed subsidy, I'm at least planning on flat funding those from the state sources, and that means I'm expecting the same as last year with no increase. And that's even with an infusion of federal cash. I expect that the state will reduce this subsidy to meet the amount of federal funds that will come in to allow them to flat fund the districts. So, I don't see any increase in there. The transportation subsidy, I haven't heard any change to that. And that's essentially, like I said, it's rate based, but it's also based on excise taxes. So even last year, when we have a booming economy, I received a payable of almost $80,000 in September for what I should have received in June because they didn't have enough money in their transportation fund. So, that comes from excises. So, that could be reduced simply because they don't have the money to pay out. And that's a big part. I mean, that 500,000 there, that's a big part for a district our size to have a transportation expense of over $1 million. But we transport 100% of our students. It's not like that. A lot of schools, are only supporting the transport of a fraction of their students, much shorter distances. So,
Doug,
yeah,
the distribution of gaming funds, could that very well be down too, but since casinos and such
yeah.
are shut?
Yeah, I mean, we usually get this number early, what we can expect, and it was about flat funded. It's usually in the 207 range. Um, but yeah, that actually is posted in May. Um, I had maybe I'm sticking my neck out here. I had said to Patty, you know, our meeting is on what, the 19th of May.
March, maybe?
No, our next board meeting,
Oh,
or the meeting where we would vote on the budget, would be the 19th. Fortunately, there's a fourth week that month. We might have to, because if we don't know what the state's direction is here, we might discuss this for another week, and I might ask the board if we could have the budget vote a week later, just so we have the most information, and we have to pass it in May because it has to sit for public review. But that would give us the most amount of time to get the most amount of information to try to put together something that would work for us. So um, I'm just sowing the seeds, Kim, if you're listening.
Yes, I'm listening.
So yeah, the other sources there, our title programs, I still see those being funded. As a matter of fact, from the Federal Department of Ed, they'll probably be strengthened through this process. The money that was coming into the state, the Fed actually wanted funneled in the rate that your title eligible schools were currently receiving from the state. So we'll see how that works. I don't know. I just feel really somber. This isn't a position that I I really want to be in, you know. These are big decisions, and I think we all need to put our heads together and really think about this, make sure that we're not just looking at pet projects, and if we don't replace a position, it doesn't mean it's not forever, just maybe for now. Or if we don't make a purchase of a, a text, it's because we can't right now. It's better to be able to try to get through the next year with the expectation that these monies just won't be received by the district than it would be for listening to, you know, um, furloughs and reduction in programs. And, you know, um, I think it's going to be austere for the next couple of years. I really do.
Now things like tech education, so like the
Yeah.
supplies. Now we're talking like wood shop and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Have we ever? No, I don't know if we can or can't. Have we ever asked for donations?
We could, and we probably will. And the first thing would be to inventory that place and actually see what we have there. There might be enough that they can change the projects for next year where you wouldn't have to make a purchase. I don't know. I don't mean this. I'm not trying to speak out of turn, but it could be where we could do some of that.
Or the projects they make, maybe somebody on the outside wanted to purchase. So like our name tags, right? They're pretty nice. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is $5. We'll say,
Yeah.
and that pays for that because that's 13,000. I mean, it's
Yeah,
about 100 and some, but
we have to look at everything. You know, we're going to have to top to bottom, just because what we want to do is maintain the employees that we have and the programs that we have, the transportation that we currently have. Um, Beyond that, and of course, maintain our facilities, which we have that set aside.
And of course, all of this is contingent upon actually having kids in the building
Right.
next year.
And see that could, we might have more issues. If this drags on too long and we have a bunch of people decide to go to cyber, then this throws this all off. We're essentially maintaining two different programs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we just need to be grateful for what we have. We're essentially sitting in facilities that are paid for. There's a lot of programs out there where, like I said, I was on a call. One of the business managers said, "Well, we were going to the index because we have a deficit." And like I said, another district said, you know, "We're 7 figures in the hole." Well, how do you come up from that? You know. So there's instruments like what they call a TRAN, which is you can borrow money against what you collect in real estate starting in July, but we have the cash to take us over that period. I couldn't imagine trying to start your year with borrowed money. Now, that's the thing when it comes to like this refinance that Piper Sandler's working on for us. That's established just for capital projects. That money can't come back to general fund. You know what I mean? That's only for capital reserve and capital projects. So, that's something. But the good thing is we don't need to think about putting money from the general fund into capital projects. And if we have that money, I received the rate sheet, and our rate on a couple of the years of the bonds was 4%. It's below 2 right now. It was between it was between 0 and 2%. So we're getting a really good deal on that refi. So that'll be something that Kevin Reed sent an email to myself and Ken Levitsky to review. It's the advertisement that they'll put in the newspaper. Every time you do like a refinance or a financing of public debt, it goes in the newspaper for several weeks prior to say that the board is considering refinancing. So we'll talk about that more at the committee meeting, but you'll see that in the paper later on. So beyond that, I haven't heard anything else for that refinancing. Does anyone have any questions of me at this point? I mean, you have my number at work. I mean, I'm primarily here Tuesday through Thursday, and then I do meals on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then catch up at the end of the day. But you all probably know what my home number is. It's listed. So,
Doug, I don't have a question, but I just
Doug,
want to commend you for putting our district in a really good financial position where we are right now. I think you've done a really great job throughout the years. And I know going forward, we do need to really look at the budget and tighten up things where we can. And I'm all for cutting unnecessary expenses to keep us in a positive direction. But other than that, great job.
Amen on
Thank
that.
you.
Like I said, I don't know how you keep all these things straight in your head, but you manage to, and thank you very much for doing it.
I do have to say, Doug, if it weren't for you, we'd be in those positions that those other districts are in. And this is the first time, even when we had the recession, that I've hear the nervousness in your voice about the budget. But I commend you on putting it together and willing to go back through it again with the different departments to see what can be cut.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to hope that, a line item I don't want is a hope and pray that we receive something. There's no hope. Won't be any hope and pray line item. So, yeah, and if we do receive more than we expected, I still don't think, we wouldn't spend that year. That would be something that we would consider for the following year. That we stay the course. Because, this could come back. We might open up in the third quarter. Things are looking good, and then by December we might be all in our homes again for a month or two.
Right.
So it's one of those where we'll just pare down as much as we can and just hold on to what we have, and then see how this works out.
I am assuming though that we are going ahead with the auditorium project.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing the state was going to consider. Wolf was considering loosening up the construction. So, and that's the one thing with this is no one would be here for that, or they would be in an isolated from. Even if we had school, they would be isolated from us. Yeah, it's just I know the engineers were concerned about their supporting services, making sure everyone was able to participate in the bid, And it seems like we've got the insurance on board now with the plan and the review and all of that. So
Since our last meeting that they were here, they have the final documents in order, and Ken now has them in his possession, overseeing and reviewing to make sure everything's in order before we go to bid.
yeah,
And I'll let everybody know as soon as that's all done.
Yeah, I was pleased that the engineers were. Now, of course, they make money when the whole thing gets going, but they were, don't bid yet kind of thing. They wanted to make sure that the market was open enough that we had a broad enough participation that we were going to get what we should get out of the bid.
For the number of bids, yeah. Well, I was so impressed with their presentation the last meeting.
Yeah. They're a big enough organization where they have all the specializations that they do, but they're small enough that it's like each one of the guys has all this experience, and so when you talk to them, oh, that's him, that's not, oh, that's three guys down the road. No, I mean, like each one of them played off of each other. And when they were here and they went over the building, I just thought it was, we went through all of our plans.
Right.
They scanned all of that stuff. We have record of everything since '63.
Right.
I mean, it's just great to have all that mechanical. There are different plans. When you go through, you have your electrical plan, you have your basic construction footprint, then you have your
And I believe
your utilities and air handling, all of that. So there's these layered plans that they can look at now. So
I think it's Andy was a school board member.
Yeah.
And so he knew the school, the makeups of school, and understood the responsibilities, and then he knew people that were lighting, and so I felt very comfortable that he knew what we were talking about when we were talking about an auditorium and a stage and what we have to go through in order to get things approved and everything that's involved in school. So
That's great.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any questions for Doug?
Hey. Yeah, Kim, I do. I've just been hiding in the corner over here. My question, well, yeah, first of all, I want to agree with Jess that, great job. I am very impressed with everything that you do. My question was, I know how we're down on revenue, but where are we at? Because I don't remember exactly what like the IU contracts say for services or our Northern Tier Career Center services. Are we still paying them, or did that get halted also that we're saving that money?
Well, it depends on the contract. If they continue to supply services to the students, even in their homes, we pay those. Others, we don't. So we do see a savings for a lot of different small services that we would have otherwise, like our OT or PT, that kind of that the services that are non-educational, that aren't being directed in the home by that special provider, I guess is the word.
No,
But we are seeing some savings.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, I
The
didn't
thing is that
remember.
Northern
Yeah.
Tier is doing the same thing that our teachers are doing, where they are giving the
Okay.
kids packets or projects, and almost all of it's over the internet. But yeah, they're still continuing at Northern Tier, just the way our students are continuing.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure how that was working with those two agencies.
Yep. They also had to do a continuity of education plan, which is posted on ours as well.
Yeah, some of the special providers aren't covered under that Act 13.
Right.
That are the education providers. So like they're required to make payments and required to pay their employees for continued service, but the employees are responsible to continue services to the students. But yeah, the other ones, we have other ones that we're just not being billed for now because we're not receiving those services. And well, I'm trying to think, Nolan. I had one. I'd received a letter at the end of last week saying that we'll be reimbursed for half of the prior month, and then not billed through the rest of this school year. And I can't remember what service that was, but it was one of those special services that we aren't receiving. That I told Amy to put it in as a receivable for this year because we'll probably be reimbursed after July 1st. You know what I mean? So I need to make sure that I get that back, and I forget who that is now. It was one that I thought we would continue to pay, but they backed out of it.
Okay. Very good.
Oh, another service is like the trainer from UPMC. I got a letter from them saying that they would be charging us because they're using their trainers at their facilities throughout this COVID. So I guess they probably flexed their nurses and doctors into the COVID, and a lot of their trainers they probably have in the offices just attending to maybe some OT, PT kind of stuff. So I imagine that's what our trainer Steph is doing. So we're not paying for that service from UPMC.
Good.
Is there any other questions for Doug? Lance, do we have any public input?
We did not.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other?
I just would like to say again, echoing what the board has said, both to all of our administrators, but to Doug as well for all the hard work that he has put into this. When you see his knees shaking like it was this whole meeting, he's nervous and has a lot of work that has to go into this. So it's calmed down quite a bit. So it is I've never been through any meeting like this before. And coming from a district where we have to do a lot of budgets like this starting in September and doing it before December because we always have to go beyond the index and looking to see what we were doing, and then coming to a school district like this where the budget was always pretty sound. it is tough and it's really hard to make these kind of decisions. But knowing that a lot of districts are in this same situation, but much worse than what we are, it's an effort that we have to pull together as a team to come up with what's the best solution for our kids, because they're our number one priority. And knowing this, that, you know, food and health is number one right now, but educating our kids is going to be the most important thing come this next school year. And how are we going to do it the best way we can with the resources that we have? And so it's nothing that we want to be in, but we are here and this is what we're faced with. And so how do we move forward? So thank you very much. And thanks for all of your help. And Doug, good job. So thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? I have to say it feels a little disconnected, us all being in different rooms and different homes. It would be nice to be all back together.
Be nice to be able to give somebody a hug.
Yes. Okay, if there's no further input, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I need a second. I'll second it. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Aye.
Thank you again, Doug, and you all have a pleasant evening. And thank you everyone that signed on and joined us.
You too, Kim. Take care now.
You too.